Hey now.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. Another great episode coming your way in just a few seconds. I'm going to get it started by talking about what's going on between Ottawa and Alberta. Looks like a memorandum of understanding is about to be signed that might pave the way for a pipeline to be built from Alberta to northwest British Columbia. It might happen. It probably won't, though, if I'm being honest. And I'm going to play you exactly why I think that coming up in just a few seconds. Before I get to that, though, on yesterday's episode, which got a ton of downloads, by the way, thank you very much to everybody who listened to yesterday's episode. I appreciate the heck out of you. Yesterday, I was talking about Highway 407. It's an express toll route that goes across the top of Toronto. And it's not owned by the public. A private company owns that, and they keep jacking up the rates to a rate where it's so unaffordable for the average person that they're making tough choices about missing life events, time with their family, and so much more because they have to sit in gridlock because they can't afford to use this express toll route. Now, I'm trying to make the case that the province should just buy it back and make it low toll or no toll and free up some of the congestion on the 401, which is the busiest highway in North America. As I pointed out yesterday, and as the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, points out all the time, gridlock on the 401 costs the Ontario economy $56 billion a year in lost productivity. Now, yesterday, I also pointed out that comparatively, there's a similar road in America, not far from where I am. If you are in Buffalo, New York, you could take that New York Thruway, a toll route, right across New York State, right to the Massachusetts border, 420 miles, and it would cost you less than $20. In comparison, the 407 in Ontario is 137 kilometers total. If you were to take it start to finish, it would cost you close to $100 one way. Somebody, and actually a number of people sent me good comparisons on social media yesterday, but I want to flag this one in particular. A listener named Dan sent this to me. He worked it out that if you wanted to take a flight in Europe, and I'm talking Amsterdam to Dublin, you could do that return trip. It's an hour and 40-minute flight. You could do the return trip for 60 euros. Converted to Canadian, it would cost you less to fly round trip from Amsterdam to Dublin than it would to take the 407 in one direction, start to finish, only 137 kilometers. If that doesn't illustrate how completely unaffordable this Cadillac of highways is, then I don't know what will. But that's a topic that is going to come up again Friday during listener DMs, because I heard from a lot of people yesterday, and people are livid that they are going to raise rates on this highway again, and totally unable to understand why the province will not do anything to get that highway back and make it affordable and allow regular people to use it. So that'll be Friday during the DMs episode. And if you want to send one in, slide into my DMs at Scott Fox on air. Now let's get to today. We're going to start off with yesterday's question period in Ottawa. We'll start with opposition leader Pierre Poilievre questioning the Prime Minister. Listen to this.
Since the Prime Minister was elected promising, quote, to negotiate a win with the U.S., American tariffs on autos, aluminum, and steel have doubled, and on Canadian lumber, they've tripled. Not a single American tariff has been reduced since he promised he would reduce them. And now he says, who cares? Yep. Mr. Speaker, I care about the 3,000 auto workers that I met on the picket line in Brampton who are out of a job. I care about the 8 mills that have closed because the Prime Minister failed to deliver a deal. The workers on those lines, they care. Canadians care. Why doesn't the Prime Minister care?
Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since I became Prime Minister, Canada has secured the lowest tariffs of any country in the world. On 85% of our goods, the tariffs are zero. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Before I let the Prime Minister finish, and I don't like interrupting the Prime Minister. It's a respect thing. I know I shouldn't do it, but I feel like if he's just going to flat out mislead people, I've got to call it out. So the Prime Minister is saying, we've got the lowest tariff rate, and he went on and on. You just heard him say it. Listen, the reason that so many goods that are Canadian are not being tariffed going into America is because of the Canada-USA-Mexico Free Trade Agreement, CUSMA. That's the reason. They're not being tariffed because they're covered under CUSMA. CUSMA was in place when Justin Trudeau was the prime minister. This prime minister can take absolutely zero credit for what's not being tariffed. That actually goes as a win to Justin Trudeau. So Mark Carney has nothing to brag about there. Anything that's not covered under CUSMA, that is what's being tariffed. And yes, Pierre Poilievre was absolutely right. The tariffs have done nothing but go up. Here's the rest of the prime minister.
There are sectors, the auto sector, the steel sector, the lumber sector, the aluminum sector, that are under pressure. We care. We're acting in those sectors. There will be announcements this week to further support.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
And before I get to Pierre Poilievre with his follow-up, the prime minister very casually there said, we care, we care. He's very robotic in the House of Commons sometimes. It's almost like he wants to get into the bluster and showmanship and start yelling, but then he reels himself back in. He still hasn't quite figured that part of Parliament out. He says we care, but just the other day he said, who cares? Was he being rude to a female reporter again? Or does he actually care? It's hard to tell, to be honest with you, because I kind of believe him when he says, who cares? Implying that he doesn't care. I kind of believe him because I think he's getting sick of being asked about it. The prime minister promised a win. He was the guy who chose July 21st as a date. It's now November the 26th, and tariffs have only gone up. Here is the follow-up from Pierre Poilievre.
Before the election, he promised elbows up. After, it was, who cares? Before the election, he said the tariffs were an existential crisis. Now he says they're not a burning issue. Before the election, he promised to negotiate a win. After, he backed down to American tariffs, and those tariffs have now doubled on Canadian aluminum, autos, and steel, and tripled on Canadian lumber. Before the election, he promised the fastest growing economy in the G7. After, he delivered the fastest shrinking economy. Why is the Prime Minister before the election so much different than the one after?
Yeah. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on the night of the election, when I had the great honor from my constituents of being elected as a deputy of this House, unlike some others in the chamber today, I made a promise to Canadians. When I make a mistake, I'll admit it. That was a poor choice of words about a serious issue. And the serious issue is what progress are we making structurally? Best deal in the world, strongest budget in the world, and the most new trade deals in the world.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Again, before I get to Pierre Poilievre, let's be honest here. Almost everything in what the Prime Minister just said was dishonest. The best trade deal with America, the part that's not tariffed has nothing to do with Mark Carney. That was in place thanks to CUSMA. Nothing to do with Carney. He wasn't Prime Minister. He wasn't even in Canada at the time. So there's that. Taking a shot at Pierre Poilievre for not winning his seat during the election under what I still think are very, very suspicious circumstances, especially seeing how great the lengths are that the Liberals are going to try and keep Pierre Poilievre from running against them in the next election. Taking a shot there, but then claiming he takes this issue seriously and he used a poor choice of words without actually acknowledging what those words were, and again, the words were, who cares, shows that he's not really taking this issue seriously. And the most new trade deals, I don't think that's even close to true. Where are the trade deals? Let me see the deals that have been done. Let me see a firm commitment from other countries to sink money into Canada. How many of them are there? Because daily, south of the border, America is racking up wins. They're attracting new companies. They're creating new jobs. And once these plants that they're attracting to America, once they get open and operating, America's going to be booming once again. We're going to hurt here, particularly where we lost a facility to the Americans. So far, this is not a passing grade here for the Prime Minister. Generally, I give him credit in the House, but he is just being very misleading and dishonest, to be honest with you, in what he's saying here in the House of Commons. And that's all intended to get a soundbite on the news. And yes, of course, the news runs that clip nonstop without calling him out. Well, I'm going to call him out because I want to give you the real story. And what the Prime Minister just said was dishonest.
The Prime Minister did make a mistake. He's made many mistakes. In fact, it's been nothing but mistakes when it's come to trade. Look at it. This Prime Minister promised that he would negotiate a win on softwood lumber. Now he says, who cares? Well, Conservatives care. Within 80 days of the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, taking office, he managed to eliminate American tariffs on softwood lumber and get refunds of them. This Prime Minister has now had 8 months, and those tariffs have now more than tripled. Prime Minister asks, who cares? I can tell you, on behalf of all the MPs on this side, we care about the jobs that are being lost in Lumbertown. Why doesn't he?
Mr. Speaker, this government cares about creating jobs in this country. That's why we proposed a budget before this House that catalyzes $1 trillion of investment over 5 years. The member opposite and his colleagues, those who could make it into the room, voted against that budget, voted against Canadian workers, voted against Canada's future. We believe in this country, Mr. Speaker, and we are building it.
Okay, there's one more exchange, and I'm going to get to that in just a sec. But again, to offer a little bit of commentary on what the Prime Minister said, well, he didn't really say anything there. The question was specifically about softwood lumber. Now, I know that the Prime Minister is doing an announcement today. In fact, let me read you the story as it's written by the Canadian press. Ottawa plans to inject $500 million in loan guarantees for Canada's softwood lumber industry. A government official says Prime Minister Mark Carney will announce the measures later today that also include aid for the steel sector. Carney's government plans to limit foreign steel imports and cut interprovincial rail freight rates in a bid to support Canada's steel industry that's threatened by U.S. tariffs. The U.S. hit Canadian steel with 50% tariffs earlier this year. That was a self-inflicted thing. We weren't negotiating properly. We were running ads in America. The Americans are upset. Trade talks are on hold. And those industries in particular are getting punished. They're the ones who are wearing it because they're not covered under CUSMA. Well, we're spending a hell of a lot of money to keep these industries afloat. $500 million in loan guarantees for the softwood lumber industry alone. Then when it comes to steel, it's weird how they're doing it. They're going to severely restrict steel imports into Canada. Only countries that we have specific trade deals with will be allowed to bring steel into Canada. So that really cuts down the supply options for Canada when it needs steel and aluminum to build things. We're really only going to be able to deal with the actual Canadian companies, but we have to ship it across the country. Well, the Prime Minister is going to suggest that we should work out a deal with the rail companies, CP Rail and et cetera, and work out a deal to ship the steel across Canada. And if we can't work out a deal, then the federal government will subsidize it. I'd really like to know more about all this money that we're giving to the softwood lumber industry, that we're giving to the steel and aluminum industry. What specifically does that money get used for? And what guarantees do we have that jobs are going to be kept in place, that it's going to continue to help the Canadian economy prosper, that the tax revenue we generate from those companies is more than going to make up for the losses that we are going to incur from giving out this money? And how do we make sure that it isn't just executives paying themselves bonuses with this money? You know, I would think that if American steel coming into Canada is heavily tariffed, and if now we're going to restrict other countries from bringing steel and aluminum into Canada, the Canadian steel and aluminum industry has a very captive audience. They're really the only game in town for all this building that Mark Carney says he wants to do. Isn't that enough stimulus? Why do we have to give them billions and billions and billions of dollars on top of that? And how do we know the actual workers are going to benefit from this and the Canadian economy as a whole is going to have a win here? I don't want to throw a whole ton of money out the door and then find out a whole bunch of executives got rich and workers are still being laid off, or that the amount of money we gave them could never be recouped from the amount of revenue that they'll generate for the Canadian coffers. Do you understand what I mean? I'm worried about how this money is being spent, and I have reason to worry because I've watched this Liberal government for 10 years squander our money. It's insanity how much money they waste. Let me give you a great example of what I'm talking about. There's a great story from media that I love, Blacklocks Reports. Holly Doan is an excellent reporter. You should follow her. Her content is behind a paywall, but it's worth every penny. They're reporting today that the deputy to Industry Minister Melanie Joly admitted yesterday Joly never read the whole contract that granted Stellantis $15 billion in taxpayer-funded subsidies before they laid 3,000 Canadian workers off. Our industry minister, Ms. Joly, who has never seen a camera that she didn't want to talk into, didn't even read the contract that gave out $15 billion to Stellantis, and she didn't realize it was okay for them to take that money and still lay off 3,000 Canadian workers. We have reason to be skeptical of this government when they're wasting a lot of money like they are. Here is just one last clip from Question Period yesterday. Then I'm going to move on to pipelines.
While Chinese, American, Indian, and other tariffs have only gone up since the Prime Minister began his 28-trip journey around the world, he hasn't had a single solitary win. In fact, the only wins he's had are for Brookfield. Just days after he met with the president, Trump signed on to $80 billion of nuclear purchases from Brookfield. And then he gave $500 million of our tax money to the European Space Agency located on Brookfield's campus. Why is it that whenever he spends his time and our money, Canadians end up poor and he and Brookfield end up richer?
Mr. Speaker, not for the first time, the Leader of the Opposition needs to check his numbers. That's right. The government of Indonesia is reducing tariffs on 95% of Canadian goods. Wow. Canada has the best deal with the United States. 85% of our goods are tariff-free. Wow. The United Arab Emirates is just confirmed that they want to invest $70 billion in this country. Wow. They believe in Canada's future. Why don't the members up?
What really did he say there? Pierre Poilievre was absolutely right. He's calling out some incredible irony here in the investments that Mark Carney still has with Brookfield. Brookfield is getting a ton of different wins. Why did we give all of that money, hundreds of millions of dollars, to the European Space Agency when we have a Canadian space agency? Why did we do that? And did you know it's on the Brookfield campus? You know, we had the Prime Minister down negotiating with Donald Trump. Shortly after that, he signed an $80 billion deal with Brookfield for nuclear power. That's two. Then on top of that, executives from Brookfield were over in the UAE just last week, only a few days before Mark Carney was there. What do you suppose that was about? What do you think that conversation was about? They said it was about developing artificial intelligence. Well, lo and behold, Brookfield has just announced a massive investment into AI. That's three. We should be asking questions about this Prime Minister and his conflicts of interest, particularly with Brookfield, and it's absolutely fair to ask that. I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk pipelines now. Pipelines are something that I think all Canadians agree on. I know from the polling that at least 7 in 10 Canadians think that part of the way Canada can return to prosperity is building pipelines and taking advantage of the resources that are right under the ground. Well, this is another story from the Canadian press. The federal and Alberta governments are expected to announce this week a memorandum of understanding in support of a new West Coast bitumen pipeline. That's oil. The agreement reportedly includes exemptions to the oil tanker ban in the northern British Columbia waters. Experts say lifting this ban would remove just one obstacle to private investment in the pipeline, as any new project would have to compete with alternatives. Trans Mountain is looking to expand its existing line to the Vancouver area, while Enbridge wants to boost throughput on its existing cross-border network. We have some pipelines. We need another one, and the one that we need to build is the one that's going to ship all of the oil over to Asia. But there's some opposition there. The British Columbia government has made it very clear they don't want it. The Green Party, Elizabeth May, she is a British Columbia member of parliament. She doesn't want it. She said, over my dead body, is that going to happen? So now we've got BC saying no. We've got the Green Party saying no, and they supported the budget on Mark Carney's word that he was going to be a friend of the environment. Well, now what do? Does the BC government get to overrule the federal government and say, hey, you guys can talk about building a pipeline all you want, but it is not going through our province? Can they say that, or is this something that is in the national interest? Well, that topic came up next in the House of Commons yesterday. I'm going to play the question from Pierre Poilievre, and then I want you to listen very, very carefully to the words that the Prime Minister does use and listen to what he doesn't say.
Speaking of Canadian interest, this Prime Minister opposed the pipeline from Alberta to the Pacific, just like his Liberal predecessor blocked that same pipeline. On Thursday, he'll make one of his grand announcements, waving around a meaningless so-called memorandum of understanding. If it's anything other than a public relations ploy, why won't he say on what date will construction begin on a pipeline from Alberta to the Pacific?
Hear it, hear it. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, sometimes the question reveals everything. The memorandum of understanding that we're negotiating with Alberta creates necessary conditions, but not sufficient conditions, because we believe in cooperative federalism. We believe the government of British Columbia has to agree. We believe that First Nations right holders in this country have to agree and support. All stakeholders have to back it. That's one Canada.
We're not getting a pipeline. We're not getting a pipeline. What Pierre Poilievre is doing there is trying to get the Prime Minister to commit right now that when he goes and signs this MOU with Danielle Smith in Alberta, that means we're building a pipeline. But that's not what the Prime Minister is saying. It doesn't create sufficient conditions to build the pipeline. He did say we need BC to buy in. We need Indigenous populations to buy in. You heard what he said. We're not building this pipeline. He's stringing us along. He wants to play it both ways, like he's pro-pipeline and he's doing everything he can to get it, but other people keep getting in the way, so we're not going to have it. He's playing games. You can tell that he worked very, very, very closely with Justin Trudeau, because that's exactly the kind of thing I would expect from Justin Trudeau. It's a very simple question. If you truly are going to go to Alberta and sign this MOU saying that we can have a pipeline between Alberta and British Columbia, when will construction start? That should be a very basic, simple question to answer. When will construction start? This spring? Is it going to be next fall? Is it going to be in 2028? When will shovels be in the ground so we can begin Canada's recovery? He didn't even acknowledge that the leader of the opposition was looking for a date. Didn't even acknowledge it. He just threw innuendo back at Pierre. It's safe to assume that when this Prime Minister goes and does that announcement in Alberta, it doesn't mean the pipeline is going to get built. But it does open up an interesting line of questions. Who can say no to this pipeline? We have to consult with Indigenous communities, of course. We, I guess, need permission from British Columbia, or do we need permission from British Columbia? And do we need permission from Indigenous groups? That's a great question. Yesterday, reporters caught up with the government House leader, Steve McKinnon, outside the House of Commons. This is kind of a bizarre exchange, too. Listen to this.
With this MOU, do you think this is a good arrangement, a pipeline is a good thing for Canada?
I just want to repeat what I said. On Thursday, we will see an MOU that will lay out a process and represent an agreement between the Government of Canada and the Government of Alberta on a way forward. And I think then all of these questions will be a little more precise.
Why won't he even say the word pipeline? Like nothing there. He won't even say pipeline. We know that there is a lot of radical environmentalists that are within the Mark Carney government. A lot of them are, and a lot of them are left over from Justin Trudeau. Now there's a lot of talk happening that, namely because of this issue, and because Carney apparently doesn't like some of them, many are now jockeying for very plum positions to get themselves out of cabinet, get themselves out of the fire, and behind the scenes, in the shadows, doing whatever they do to make themselves very wealthy. We already know about Chrystia Freeland. Apparently, she's still a member of parliament for her riding in Toronto, yet she's not even in Canada right now. She's over in Ukraine. Special envoy to Ukraine, and she now leads the Rhodes Trust. She's in charge of a ton of money. Globalists have given her a ton of money to look after. Chrystia Freeland is moving to the United Kingdom. She's gone. Not somebody that Carney will have in his cabinet. I'm also hearing that Melanie Joly wants a new gig too. She wants to be the ambassador to France. Currently, that job belongs to former Liberal leader Stéphane Dion. Well, Mark Carney can appoint whoever he wants to be the ambassador to France, and reports say it's going to be Melanie Joly. Stephen Guilbeault, former environment minister, current heritage minister, apparently he wants out too. This is a mass exodus from Carney's cabinet. I think he's just going to go back into environmental extremism. I don't know if he's looking for not a cabinet position, an appointed position or what, but apparently he also wants out. Karina Gould, she ran against Mark Carney to be prime minister. She didn't win, and Carney didn't even put her in cabinet. Reports are she's preparing to leave as well, likely to run for the leadership of the Ontario Provincial Party. There's a lot of people that want out of Mark Carney's cabinet. The reason I'm pointing that out is the irony. The irony is insane. One Conservative member of Parliament wanted out. He crossed the floor over to the Liberals. Chris D'Entremont, or whatever that idiot's name is. That was national news. Wall-to-wall coverage for days in this country. Wall to wall. You could not turn on a radio or a television or open up a social media feed and not see someone talking again about problems with the Conservative Party. Members want out. It's Pierre's leadership style. That's what they tried to do because they're trying like crazy to get rid of Pierre Poilievre, because the last thing on earth the Liberals want is to run against Pierre Poilievre in another federal election. They don't want to do it. Will the mainstream media dedicate that much attention to covering the amount of people that want out of Mark Carney's party? And will they dedicate much time or attention to the positions that some of these people are going to get? How can Chrystia Freeland still draw a salary from Canadian taxpayers when she's in Ukraine and she's announced she's moving to the UK? Melanie Joly, what do we owe her to give her that position of ambassador to France? She'll be living in a palace, basically. No accountability, huge staff, gets to run around Paris and Cannes and Nice all the livelong day, having fun on the Canadian taxpayers' dollar. What did she do to deserve that? Jonathan Wilkinson, former environment minister. He's another one who's right into these green causes. I'm assuming he doesn't like this pipeline thing either. Reports are he's going to be appointed Canada's ambassador to the European Union. What did he do to deserve that? Why should he get to live off the taxpayer dime for a long time, living a real nice life, by the way? There's so many examples of people who have done horrible things for our country, just terrible performances in their role, not accountable to the people in any way. And they're going to get rewarded with plum positions. And I'm assuming Carney's going to give them these positions so that they don't turn on him in the public. Carney doesn't want a scenario where the media can't even ignore how many people want out of his government. So everybody's going to play nice in the sandbox because they're going to get rewarded with nice appointments and huge salaries and all kinds of other perks. Why isn't the media all over this story? Because for days leading up to D'Entremont crossing the floor, it was all whispers and rumors and innuendo. Ooh, a conservative is getting ready to cross the floor. Well, now there's at least 5 cabinet ministers that are preparing to walk on Mark Carney. Not a whisper from the mainstream media. If that doesn't show you how incredibly biased this media is against conservatives and in favor of liberals, I don't know how else to explain it. It's actual craziness. Yesterday on CBC's Power and Politics, David Cochran, the host of the show, was interviewing someone that I love to play clips from regularly here on this podcast, my former member of parliament and someone I look up to a lot. She's an incredibly intelligent person. Her name is Lisa Raitt, former cabinet minister under Stephen Harper. She was on talking about whether or not we can or can't take from what happened yesterday in the prime minister's comments to mean we are or aren't going to have a pipeline. This is going to be about 1 minute and 30 seconds. Listen very carefully to the question and Lisa's response.
But, you know, Lisa, I wonder, the Prime Minister did say something in question period today that we feel BC would need to agree. Now, the Conservatives have jumped on that and said, oh, that's giving British Columbia a veto. I sought clarity on that and was told we shouldn't conclude that, but then when I asked for clarification, none was immediately forthcoming. If it isn't a veto, it leaves the impression that potentially, if BC doesn't agree, it doesn't go ahead. How do you expect this to play out? Because I don't see David Eby agreeing, certainly in the current state. They run environmental risk with a pipeline going through their territory without necessarily getting the economic rent. They don't get royalties and these things. So do you cut them into the deal? Do you offer them a stake? Like, how does this possibly work that you get the new Democrat government of British Columbia on board with this?
Well, I mean, if every province was going to get what they were supposed to get by virtue of the fact that there's goods crossing through them, then you would have very rich provinces across the country. And that's just not the way that it works. I think we can't think about it that way. We can't think about British Columbia holding the only tidewater in the western part of Canada. I don't think that's fair. I think you have to think about that port in Vancouver and Prince Rupert is actually a port for the entire prairies. And that's exactly how it's sold when you're building the infrastructure. Otherwise, why are we investing billions of dollars in infrastructure, in port infrastructure for one province? And if there's nothing for them, then there's nothing that's going to happen about it. So I'm going to reject that premise. On the political side of it, though, I find it interesting we're having this conversation that Liberal MPs are worried about losing their seats. When I take a look at the canvass in British Columbia, it's the Conservatives that are in second place in the province when it comes to the number of federal seats. And it's only by 1. So we're not that far behind. So who's to say that it's not going to be a Conservative that's going to take that seat? And I think we're all very clear on where Conservatives stand with respect to pipelines, especially ones that are going to be bringing prosperity. So I don't necessarily ascribe to everything that's being said with respect to BC having a veto, getting back to your original question. I don't think they should. I think the Supreme Court has said they don't. And quite frankly, a negotiation should happen. But at the end of the day, David, this comes down to an election, then let's go. And let's figure out exactly what we stand for. Do we want an economic bright future, or do we want to hold back different parts of the country because you're uncomfortable with your cut in a deal?
That's a fine point. Let's have an election. That's what I was hoping we were going to be doing, but that got kiboshed. There's another opportunity coming up soon. Let's have an election over this. And here's my question to you, and I want you to think very carefully about this. Ask yourself in your heart of hearts, if we have another election and the choice is clear that Mark Carney is not going to be a prime minister who can say, I got a pipeline built. He's just not going to do it. You know, he's so wishy-washy on this. He is trying to ride it right down the middle. He's going to sign an MOU that means nothing, saying that, yeah, there probably could be a pipeline, but these other people are going to block it so that I don't have to. That's basically the game that Mark Carney is playing. He won't actually say if he thinks BC can veto this, but he thinks they can, and that would be just fine with him if they do. Okay, let's have an election. Conservatives are very clear. We're going to build pipelines. We're going to build oil refineries so we can make our own gas here in Canada. We're going to do all the things that we have to do to make Canada prosperous. That road to the Ring of Fire in central northern Ontario that Doug Ford wants done, the Conservatives will build it. Those are the things that the Conservatives will do. You've seen Mark Carney as Prime Minister for 8 months now? What has he done? He's been the Prime Minister. You've seen him in action. There's no reason to think that much more is going to get done on the pipeline file. So let's have an election. Do you think Canada would make a different choice this time? That's my question to you. Do you think it would be different if we had an election tomorrow and at stake was, under Conservatives, we build pipelines, under Liberals, more of the same, probably no pipeline? Do you think Canadians would return the Liberals to power? Because I think there's a chance they might. The brainwashing that many people have been through is hard to overcome. The mainstream media has brainwashed people into thinking the Conservatives are bad, evil people. That's far from reality. The choice couldn't be any more clear at what's at stake here. I don't know, guys. I think there's a chance that if we had an election tomorrow, the Liberals would win. But that window is coming to a close very quickly because soon it'll be impossible to deny. Doesn't seem like Mark Carney is really that interested in pipelines or any of the things that he said he would do. Doesn't seem like he is some master negotiator that knows how to tame Trump, like he said he was. This isn't going anywhere, and that's incredibly frustrating. How are we going to get stuff done if we have a prime minister who says one thing and then does something completely different? We're not going to make any progress, and that's just the reality of it. Before I talk about cannabis, I want to issue a correction from yesterday. Yesterday, as I was recording, I got a breaking news alert that there was reason to believe Ukraine and Russia had agreed to peace. They still might. In fact, it might even happen today. But that was a premature report. And in the name of being honest, I want to declare that that was a false report here on the pod that they had agreed to peace. But again, they are close. The president, Donald Trump, on Air Force One talking to the media. He's heading down to his home in Florida to celebrate the U.S. Thanksgiving. Here's him talking with reporters just a few hours ago.
Can you start off by telling us the latest with Russia and Ukraine? Are you expecting Zelensky to come visit you?
We're having good, I don't know, he would like to come, but I think we should get a deal done first. We're having good talks. We started with Russia, we're having some talks with Russia. Ukraine is doing well. I think they're pretty happy about it. They'd like to see it end. And we won't know for a little while, but we're making progress.
What are the big things?
We settled 8 wars, and I thought this would be one of the easier ones because of my relationship with President Putin. But this is probably one of the more difficult ones. There's a lot of hatred.
I'm really hopeful that this deal gets done. I think a deal getting done would be good for everybody, including Ukraine. Stop the killing. And you know what? If there's details to work out over specific territories, that's stuff we can work out, but put the guns down. Stop firing missiles. Stop killing each other. No more dead Ukrainians. No more dead Russians. Stop the fighting. And then let's carry on with this peace plan and make it something that works for everybody. Hopefully, we will be announcing peace in Ukraine very, very soon. I said I wanted to talk about cannabis to wrap up this episode, so I'm going to read you another story as it's written by the Canadian Press. Ottawa and the provinces raked in more than $5.4 billion in cannabis tax revenues since it was legalized for recreational use back in October 2018. The federal government has collected $1.2 billion. The remaining $4.2 billion has gone to provincial coffers. Federal tax revenue does fall short of the government's original projections. In the 2018-2019 budget, the government expected to see $690 million in cannabis tax revenues over the first 5 years of recreational legalization. Ottawa collected $567 million by the end of the 2022-2023 fiscal year, so well short of our target. When it comes to the provincial breakdown, Ontario took in the greatest provincial share of revenue, $1.5 billion in revenue from legalized recreational cannabis sales. Alberta came in second at just over $1 billion, despite having less than a third of Ontario's population. Alberta collected the most per capita tax revenue of any province, $210 per person. Meanwhile, Quebec has the lowest per capita share of recreational cannabis tax revenue at just $55.31 per person since October 2018. How is this possible? I don't understand. I did not necessarily agree with Justin Trudeau when he said, we're not just going to decriminalize cannabis, we're going to legalize cannabis. At the time, I thought that was short-sighted, but in hindsight, I can look back and say, good job, Justin Trudeau. I think a lot of people are enjoying the convenience and the flexibility and the ability to be able to buy legal cannabis. And they're paying taxes on it. That's great. In hindsight, I don't know why it was illegal in the first place. But let me declare another bias. I'm a recreational cannabis user. I use cannabis daily. And I don't mind saying that. There was a time when you would have been looked at as just a piece of scum. You use cannabis every day? Frankly, I don't know many people that don't use it at least several times a week. It's been a big game changer for a lot of people. Then why is tax revenue lower than they projected? Did they overestimate how much money they were going to bring in? Because I remember thinking at the time, they're underestimating how much money they're going to bring in. I thought they were setting us up to make it seem like some great success. Wow, we only thought it would bring in $597 million and it brought in over $1 billion. That's what I was expecting. Never did I think revenues would be lower. So why is that? I'm going to put forward a suggestion and then I'm going to leave it to you if you'd like to weigh in on listener DMs on Friday. Here's what I think. Number one, the rollout has been atrocious. The government spent my entire life up until about 5, 6, 7 years ago telling me that this is my brain and this is my brain on drugs. And if I use cannabis, I am a hardened criminal. We went from hardened criminal, people with lifetime criminal records for using it, to legal. And there wasn't a whole lot of education in the meantime. The government never came out and properly explained why they spoke to us the way they did for so long, then only to turn around and legalize it and admit, oh, it's totally fine. You guys can totally use this. No problem. It's no issue. There's a few steps that were missed there, and there's a large segment of the population, mainly older folks, that still think it's a little weird that they can buy cannabis legally in a store. And frankly, I agree with them. That must be an incredibly weird thing. I adapted, but a lot of people can't or didn't. I also don't like how they treat people when they go to a cannabis store. Until very recently, in Ontario anyway, cannabis stores had to have their windows blacked out or covered over with paper. They made you feel like a criminal when you were going in to buy it. As soon as you walk into the store, the first thing they did was have a staff member come running over to check your ID. God forbid someone under 19 see into a cannabis store. I never understood that. Yet if you go to the liquor store, big, bright, colorful displays meant to draw your eye and draw your attention. Kids are allowed in the liquor store, but in the cannabis store, you got to be 19 to even go in, and nobody was allowed to see through the windows. It didn't make any sense. Now, cannabis stores, I think, very, very well run. Many of them have a boutique vibe. It's very nice how they've done it in a lot of cases. Why aren't they allowed to advertise their product? What's the problem here? You got all these cannabis stores that are employing a lot of people and clearly generating big tax revenue for the government. Why do they not get the exact same treatment that the liquor stores get? The government liquor monopoly. Why are the rules different? The products are in the same realm, but different. I'll certainly concede that. But I don't think that we have nearly as many problems in this country related to cannabis as we do related to alcohol. So why the stringent set of rules on cannabis stores? And then when we did legalize it, there seems to be no rhyme or reason for where we put the stores. You can go kilometers and not see a cannabis store and then see 4 on one block. It doesn't make any sense. I think that the government needs to look in the mirror and ask themselves which lane they want to be in. Are we pro-cannabis or are we anti-cannabis? And if we're pro-cannabis, and I have to think based on that revenue, we're pro-cannabis, then they've got to liberalize the rules a little bit. Take your foot off the gas a little bit here, government. This is normal now. People are enjoying it. In fact, if you deregulated that industry somewhat, allow these stores to function like every other store. At least allow them to function like the liquor stores do. I don't think that there'd be as much of a stigma or a taboo. Allow them to increase the potency for those of us who want it a little stronger. Part of the reason that revenue is low is because there's still people going to the black market. Why would they go to the black market and deal with some shady guy when there's perfectly nice, well-lit stores run by people that are paying taxes, etc.? Why would they still go to the other guy? Because the other guy's got the good stuff. The government stuff is not the same. Government edibles in particular, not nearly strong enough for some people who have built up quite the tolerance. We need to make changes here. If revenue came in lower than expected, the government should be looking at each other, federal, provincial, municipal, and saying, why did that happen? What did we do wrong here? There's a lot of places we could improve in that industry. And if you want to weigh in on that or anything else, slide into my DMs at Scott Fox on Air. I'm going to leave you today, as I do every day, with the great sounds of Pat James and The Whole Truth. The song is available on Spotify or wherever you get music. It's called Hey Now. I'll see you right back here tomorrow with more After 9.